My dear Rusty, I'm not sure that was wise. We might have to abandon this city. He had no choice. We have to help the children and the other residents of the slums. There is always a choice, hero. A burden replied to Alexander as Rusty moved through the empty streets. He could see people glancing through cracked shutters as he rushed past, their eyes curious but filled with fear. Doors were nailed shut, along with some windows, as residents refused to leave their homes, probably worried that thieves might use the chaos as an opportunity to rob them. Rusty turned his helmet but did not slow down. He had summoned his guides because he was unsure how bad the situation was. They could be useful in the coming fight, both by using the puppet skill and by helping him form a plan. Aberdan was right. His current choice had not been well thought out. While his new mercenary leader was covering for him, he did not know what would actually happen. For all he knew, even with her support, he could still be punished, and prison was not an option. Humanoid prisons did not allow anyone to wear heavy armor or carry weapons. The moment he was captured, they would try to strip him of his gear, and then his secret would be exposed. Beneath the armor, he was nothing more than a hollow suit with a dead head inside. Rusty pushed the thought aside as his boots struck the cobblestones in a steady rhythm. The risk of exposure, of being dragged into a cell and stripped of everything that kept him functioning, was real. Yet it felt distant compared to the image of the children, and of Gleam lying dead after the orc attack. We will deal with that later. For now, focus on the battle. Whatever you say, my dear Rusty. Do not worry, I have already memorized all the current maps. Reaching another location will be quite easy. How about we head to the demon realm next and leave these pitiful creatures behind? Aberdan chuckled. It was obvious that the demon lord disliked Rusty's plan. Living among humanoids, whom he considered inferior, was something he despised. He constantly urged Rusty to travel to the demonic lands, to conquer them and claim the throne as the new demon king, but to Rusty such titles held no real value. Focus on the present. If the breach is recent, there is still time. But would Gleam signal me if the situation were not dire? Rusty responded to Alexander, and after a brief pause, his guide answered. That is possible, but we will not know until we get there. Alexander was right. There was no way to judge the severity of the situation yet. The signal enchantment was basic, able to transmit only a blinking pattern that could mean several things. Only when he arrived would he understand the true extent of the damage. As he moved deeper toward the slum district, the silence began to change. At first, there was nothing, just empty, deserted streets and a few people watching from abandoned buildings. Eventually, he noticed smoke drifting with the wind, accompanied by humanoid screams. Beneath it all came the faint clash of metal and the unmistakable roar of orcs. Rusty quickened his pace but maintained his current form. He wanted to switch to his wraith form to move faster, but with eyes on him from different directions, he could not risk exposing his true nature. For now, he had to remain a mercenary heading to reinforce the forces near the western gate. The streets grew narrower and more uneven, the buildings more cramped. Then, finally, there was movement. Ahead of him, people were running. Slum residents who had failed to reach the church and were barred from entering the noble or merchant districts. Run! How did the orcs get through the wall? I don't know, just keep running, we will hide somewhere. It was a small family. The father carried a child as he ran alongside his wife. When they saw Rusty rushing toward them, they hesitated in fear, but he did not slow down. He sidestepped them and kept moving. Soon he passed more fleeing figures, confirming he was close. So it was true. The orcs made it inside. A loud bang suddenly echoed through the narrow street ahead, followed by the sound of splintering wood and a monstrous roar that no human throat could produce. Rusty turned the corner and finally saw it. An orc had smashed through the side of a small shack, its massive frame forcing its way inside as if the walls were paper. A moment later, it stepped back out, dragging a struggling man by the leg. The man clawed at the dirt, screaming, but the orc only laughed as it lifted him like he weighed nothing. Without slowing, Rusty drew his sword and lunged. The blade cut cleanly across the orc's arm. The bone cracked, and the limb holding the man dropped uselessly to the ground. Before the orc could react, Rusty pivoted and drove his sword straight through its throat. Instead of a roar, there was only a wet gurgle before the creature collapsed. This orc. For a moment, he paused, looking at the system message that showed the experience he had gained. It was more than expected and clearly indicated that the creature had been a D- rank. Thank you, thank you. The man scrambled back in panic when he saw Rusty, then forced himself to calm down as he noticed the old emblem of the Black Hound mercenaries. Rusty said nothing. He simply moved deeper into the slum district, where growling echoed from all directions. The farther he went, the clearer it became that this was a true breach. In the cramped alleyways and neglected buildings, he found them. Orcs, and humanoids fleeing from them. His blade moved without hesitation, decapitating some and stabbing others in quick succession. He did not look back at the people he saved or listen to their words. Instead, he pressed forward toward the lair he had created. Memories surfaced in his mind of when he first claimed it and how much effort it took to repair. Even if he had not been here long, to him, a creature not so long ago, it mattered. The people living here mattered as well. They made it this far? What are these idiots even doing? Alexander's voice echoed in his head as he complained about the city's ruler. Rusty had already slain 4 orcs along the way, and it seemed more had slipped through. The city guards had ways to signal for help, yet they had not used them. No signals. No magical flares. Nothing to indicate that anything was wrong. Why would they do anything, hero? It is just a few commoners and beggars here. Inconsequential. This fat pig noble is not entirely foolish. A burden seemed to approve of the nobility's actions, sacrificing a few to maintain stability. Relocating troops was possible, but they would clearly rather risk the lives of slum dwellers than allow orcs to break through the main gates. Rusty did not respond. He continued forward, and at last he drew closer. The sounds of battle grew louder. His home lay near the eastern gate and wall. Then he saw it. Bright flashes of light, and something buzzing in the sky. It is Gleam. His companion hovered above, sending bursts of magical energy down onto the orcs below. Without a break, Rusty surged forward and burst through an alleyway. An orc charged at him, but he did not hesitate. Instead, he increased his speed and drove forward. His shield slammed into the creature, along with another that tried to intercept him. Both were sent flying backward, crashing into a heap of shattered crates and splintered wood. The impact echoed through the wider street that led to his lair. Several orcs were already there, and more were pouring in from the path that led toward the western gate. Good work, Gleam. I got your signal. The first thing he checked was the entrance to his lair. It was still holding, with multiple orc corpses scattered around it. It seemed Gleam had managed to protect everyone and was now in the sky, trying to lure the monsters away from the entrance. Her tactic was working. The monsters were busy throwing rocks and weapons at her, but none managed to land a proper hit because of her speed. Let's do it together, Gleam. I'll draw their attention like always. Gleam wiggled her antennae as she readied a more powerful spell. Rusty, on the other hand, held out his shield and began striking it with the flat of his longsword. The noise immediately caused the orcs to turn their heads toward him. For a moment, they stood still. Then one of them let out the usual battle cry and sprinted toward him. The others stopped throwing at Gleam and quickly charged in his direction, just as planned. There were exactly 6 of them, and one stood out as larger, a proper mid-D rank. The monster's body rippled with muscle as it pushed through the front line. Thicker armor was strapped over its shoulders, and crude metal plates were hammered into its skin. It did not rush like the others. It advanced slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. Rusty shifted his stance the moment he saw it. The smaller orcs behind the brute spread out instinctively, trying to cut off any escape routes. They forgot about one important thing: Gleam above them. The ant's mandibles opened wide as a ball of prismatic energy formed between them. She lowered her head, and the magic burst, raining down streaks of energy that pierced the bodies of the lesser orcs. As the monsters screamed in agony, Rusty moved forward to confront the large brute. His opponent swung its massive axe at him, only to meet his shield. The impact rippled through his metallic body, but he did not react. With his increased weight skill, and shield technique, he dispersed most of the force and took no damage. His blade moved with precision as he drove it into the monster's thigh. As the brute tried to recover, Rusty's body blurred for a moment as he activated his dash to create distance. "You're slow," he muttered as a flurry of blows came at him. He blocked or parried every strike. The brute was already injured, which slowed it down, but not for long. The blood quickly stopped flowing, and Rusty noticed something new. A self-regenerating ability he had not encountered often before. "Be careful, Rusty. This orc has strong self-healing. Shallow wounds will not work. You need to finish it quickly." Alexander called out as the clash between the two monsters continued. Rusty used his dash skill to create some distance, then exchanged his weapons. While no one was looking, he brought out his favorite weapon, the halberd. It crackled with electrical energy as he moved in for a swift kill. If inflicting wounds and draining the fleshy orc of its vitality would not work, then he needed a single brutal strike to bring it down instantly. His halberd shot forward, the point piercing the monster's leg again and stopping it in its tracks. As the counterattack came, he activated his dash skill to evade it, repositioning himself to the side. The creature turned its head away, and Rusty followed with a chopping motion, swinging his weapon forward. The enchantment was not even necessary as the axe-like blade sliced cleanly through the creature's neck. The monster fell at once, its own momentum carrying it forward as it tumbled into the body of another orc. Down, now time for the, oh! To his surprise, in the time it took him to defeat the D-rank orc, Gleam had already dealt with the lesser opponents. Their bodies were riddled with holes from her magical prism missiles, a spell she had become quite proficient in. Rusty lowered his halberd and scanned the area with his life detection skill. The street had gone quiet again, but in the distance he could hear shouting and the clash of blades. The wall was still under siege, and he needed to decide what to prioritize. You did well, Gleam. Now tell me what happened. Rusty nodded as she relayed the information. So not much time has passed since some orcs broke through. I see. It seemed the attack had lasted only 15 minutes and had not been a full breach. Thanks to her ability to fly, Gleam had seen everything. A group of orcs had taken part of the wall and forced their way through using a few ladders, while the guards and adventurers fell back. Even now, they were trying to reclaim that section but had not succeeded. The orcs had spread out afterward. Some attacked the gate, trying to open it, while others moved into the city to cause chaos. In a way, this worked in the defenders' favor, as the orcs had thinned their own forces by roaming through the slums. The children are safe, but if this continues, it will only become more dangerous. He could stay and defend his lair with the children inside, or head toward the gate and help the remaining defenders push back the siege. From his earlier assessment, he knew there were D-rank enemies among them, a threat the guards would struggle to handle alone. Are you sure? Good. Then I'll leave it to you. After a brief conversation with Gleam, he nodded. She had already proven herself a capable defender, so there was no reason to doubt her skills. To resolve the situation, he needed to deal with it at the source. The Western Gate. Take care, Gleam. If anything happens, use the enchantment again. Gleam nodded and landed on the roof of his home. Her body, along with her armor, shone for a moment as she began chanting. It was a protective spell, large enough to cover the entirety of his lair and shield it from the various projectiles being hurled amid the distant battle. Then I'm off. He took off running again, this time toward the source of the breach. The moment he stepped onto the main road leading to the Western Gate, he saw the battle unfolding. The orcs were pushing forward, and the defenders were struggling to hold their ground. Like a bolt of lightning, he surged ahead, gripping his halberd with both hands, ready to cleave through anything in his path. I said hold the line. Yes sir, we can't. The orcs are getting through. We need to retreat. No retreat or surrender. We either kill them here or die trying. The guard captain's voice cracked as he shouted at the guards and adventurers struggling to hold the line. They were packed together along one side of the wall, bracing their spears and pikes in a desperate effort to keep the orcs from pouring through the breach. Things looked grim. The formation was already starting to break. The barricade they had thrown together from shattered carts and splintered beams groaned under another heavy impact. A massive orc slammed into it, followed by two more. Their combined weight forced the entire structure back half a step. Oliver, what should we do? If this keeps up. A girl with a bow loosed an arrow toward the orcs climbing the wall on the far side. Beside her, a young man drove his spear into a creature trying to scale the wall from their side. But if we run, the knights might execute us. Another girl spoke in a hushed voice. She also carried a bow, with a dagger strapped at her hip. Her aim was not as steady as the other girls, the one with the distinctive cat ears. I don't know. If this continues, we might not have a choice. Rika, Tally, if they break through, just run. The young man spoke quietly to his party as he took in the situation. They had only recently reached E rank. Their equipment had improved, and their skills had grown, but they were still no match for D-rank monsters on their own. Most of the defenders were F and E rank adventurers or guards. A handful of D-rank fighters stood among them, with the guard captain the strongest of all, still shouting for everyone to stand strong. Even so, they were being overwhelmed. It was clear that without reinforcements, the line would collapse within minutes. Another impact shook the barricade. Wood cracked, and ropes snapped. One of the beams splintered as an orc forced its arm through the gap, seized a guard, and dragged him back. The man screamed as he was pulled toward the writhing mass of green monsters beyond, but before he vanished, several spears struck the creature's arm. "Hold it together!" The captain shouted again, but more gaps opened in the barricade as the monsters continued to push through. Oliver tightened his grip on his spear. His hands trembled. He had fought monsters before, goblins, even hobgoblins. He had defended this wall in the past. But this was different. The situation was far worse now, and he knew that in a few moments, it would turn into chaos, everyone fighting for their own survival. A decision needed to be made, and soon he turned to his friends. "Rika. Tally, stay behind me. Are we really going to?" Rika trailed off as she glanced away from the wall and the small horde of orcs still gathered on the other side. The situation looked grim, and before they could decide whether escaping and becoming deserters was worth it, she noticed something. "Wait, look. Something is coming, and it is coming really fast." She pointed toward the main road. There, something reflected the red light of the setting sun. At first, it was only a flicker in the distance, enough to make Rika think she was imagining things, but soon she saw clear movement. A figure was sprinting toward them, fully armored and holding a large, glowing halberd. "Wait, there is a person, that armor, it looks like Mr. Edmund." Edmund. Oliver reacted immediately to the name and looked in the direction Rika was pointing. He saw the figure too, someone all of them recognized. Their weapons and armor came from his store, and they knew he was a senior adventurer far above their level. "I thought all the D-ranked adventurers were at the southern wall. What is he doing here? Did they send reinforcements?" Oliver muttered as he watched the approaching figure. Did he come to help us? Are reinforcements actually coming?" Tally asked, but when the group looked behind the charging Edmund, their hearts sank. There was no one else. No adventurers, no mercenaries, just a single man charging straight into the orcs. "But, even if he is alone, isn't he not doing incredibly well?" Rika pointed as she saw two orcs cut down by a glowing sweep of his halberd before they could react. A roar of thunder followed, and the battlefield seemed to shift. Just as the blockade was about to break, the armored man plunged directly into the orc ranks. His halberd spun in wide arcs, slicing through limbs on every side. The monsters noticed him too late, their attention fixed on the collapsing barricade and the defenders behind it. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already too late. As what happened next, no one could foresee. Boom! A massive explosion thundered across the battlefield as the armored man hurled something into the clustered orcs. White and dark energy surged outward in a violent shockwave that tore through the tightly packed creatures. Bodies were flung in every direction, some crashing into shattered barricades, others hurled over the wall into the stunned defenders. Everyone froze for a moment as a buzzing sound filled their ears. They turned to the orcs, who struggled in confusion as they tried to get back on their feet. Their regenerative abilities could not keep up as halberd strikes rained down on them. At the center of the carnage stood a lone man in an armored suit glowing with layered enchantments. Each swing of his weapon ended another monster, heads severed or bodies crushed in an instant. The tide of battle shifted just as quickly, and for the first time, the defenders had a moment to breathe. What are you looking at? Push back, you idiots! Don't waste this chance!" The guard captain finally regained control of himself. Realizing the opportunity, he gripped his long sword and charged forward into the chaos unfolding before him. With the orcs stunned, the defenders had a rare opening that could not be wasted. "Forward! Aid that mercenary!" The captain roared, his voice steady again as he vaulted over the shattered barricade. It was time for a counter-offensive, and with the orcs reeling from the recent explosion, it came more easily than expected. Edmund pressed on toward the breached section, scaling the wall as he carved a path ahead. He was not alone. Soon, arrows flew from the other side of the wall, striking the disoriented orcs as they tried to regroup. "Rika, help Mr. Edmund!" Oliver shouted, all thoughts of retreat gone. "I'm trying, but he's moving too fast." Rika called back, struggling to aim. Some of the other adventurers released their arrows as well, a few striking their own savior in the shoulder and back. Luckily, his armor proved too strong to pierce. He did not even flinch, continuing forward toward the ladders the orcs used to scale the wall. The scene brought back memories for the three adventurers of the last orc siege. Back then, this man had displayed similar strength, but what they witnessed now was on an entirely different level. Before, he had seemed like a capable E-rank adventurer. Now, his power appeared to reach the peak of D rank, perhaps even beyond. Was he hiding his true strength all this time? How did he grow this strong so quickly? They watched in astonishment as their senior cut through the enemy. Even when orcs grabbed him or struck his armor, he showed no reaction. He absorbed every blow and returned them tenfold. He knew exactly what to target. If the ladders were not destroyed, the orcs would keep pouring in. Another explosion followed as he hurled something that looked like metal plates fused together. Rika could clearly see them glowing in black and white before they erupted with violent force after touching each other. This explosion erupted just beyond where the ladders were placed, bursting between them. Sections of the upper wall crumbled, and the orcs climbing upward were torn apart mid-ascent. Their bodies were flung back like broken dolls as the blast ripped through the structure that held the ladders in place. The entire charge lasted less than 5 minutes, yet the hopeless situation had somehow turned around. It had only taken one person to change everything, the armored man named Edmund. He remained atop the wall, swinging his halberd at the remaining orcs as they turned toward him, but it was already too late for them. Guards and adventurers surged forward. Spears and pikes struck green flesh and drove into it from every direction. The monsters roared in rage, but their formation had collapsed, and the strange explosions had wiped out a third of their numbers. The rest were stunned, left disoriented by the sound and shockwave. Now the adventurers and guards only needed to clear out the stragglers as the counter-offensive began. Push them back! Do not let any of them survive! The guard leader shouted as he drove his blade into an orc. Thanks to Edmund's intervention, only E-ranked orcs remained, leaving the soldiers with little more than clean-up duty. The battlefield was drenched in the monsters' blood. Their screams filled the air as they were skewered by the defenders' weapons, and after about 10 minutes, the stronghold side of the wall finally fell silent. We did it! One of the adventurers cried out before stumbling back and collapsing to his knees from exhaustion. Others leaned on each other or their spears, but they could not rest for long. More ladders slammed against the walls, and the orcs began their assault again. Back to your posts now! Drive them back! Despite the exhaustion, one person remained relentless. The man who had led the charge continued to swing his halberd, cutting down every green-skinned creature that came within reach. His stamina seemed endless as he slew one monster after another, as if driven by a tremendous will for victory. Almost there. I am so close. Should I have waited and let more of them climb up? Damn it! Rusty, known to the others as Edmund, pressed on, cutting down more orcs. He had rushed here to stop the horde from breaching the wall, using his old technique of combining dark and light elements to create explosions. He could control this magic to some extent by assembling metal plates joined loosely by a rivet at one end. When he threw them, the loose connection snapped the plates together, triggering the unstable reaction that caused the explosion. This gave him enough time to hurl them safely without risking injury. Using this method, he had managed to level up again and was now close to reaching level 25. It was a risky move, but the only one he could use and still justify. He could enchant his gear, and it was possible to mimic explosions with magic. If anyone asked, that would be his explanation, that he had used pre-prepared spells to drive the monsters back. While the danger had been real, once he was in the thick of battle, he realized there was nothing to fear. The D-rank monsters in the orc group were relatively weak, so cutting them down was easy, and the experience points quickly added up. For a moment, he considered repeating what he had done during the first siege and jumping over the wall to fight the monsters outside. There were still many approaching, but not enough to scale the walls again now that they had been reclaimed. If I leave the city, they will definitely accuse me of desertion. Rusty decided against it. He still was not sure how the knights would react to his decision to come here in the first place. Although he had been a great help, leaving now was not an option. Instead, he switched to a bow he had taken from one of the fallen humans and began firing. Take that, you stinking orcs! Go to hell, you monsters! Kill them all! Soon, other adventurers, mercenaries, and even guards who usually stayed in the back joined in, firing bows and crossbows at the enemy. Arrows cut through the darkening sky, and the battlefield glowed with flashes of red light mixed with blood. The monsters kept advancing, but they were even more disorganized than before. They lost most of their leaders. This seems to be over. Boring. A burden remarked, noting that almost no D-rank orcs remained. Rusty had made it his priority to eliminate them first. Without commanders to rally them, the remaining orcs acted more like a scattered mob than an invading force. Some still tried to climb the walls, driven by instinct or rage, but many hesitated, snarling and pushing each other at the base. More importantly, Rusty wanted the experience points they provided. The E-rank monsters were not enough to push him toward his next evolution. The battle continued into the night. It was not easy, but it became clear that the orcs' plan had failed. What's that? A few hours later, a loud horn echoed from the distance. It was not a signal to charge, but to retreat. The scattered monster forces halted, then began to withdraw. The defenders stopped firing, confused for a moment, and for good reason. These monsters usually followed a set pattern, but this time they had attacked the western gate with greater force and were now retreating much sooner than expected. They might be planning something. This time, it was Alexander who spoke, and Rusty simply nodded. It did seem strange. The monsters were beginning to change their tactics. What could that plan be? He lowered his bow and straightened up. Around him, adventurers and mercenaries cheered, though many soon dropped to their knees in exhaustion. From Rusty's perspective, the attack had been dangerous. Someone out there is starting to think. They are trying new tactics. Next time, it could be on a completely different scale. Those words stayed with him, giving him something to consider. He was no longer an inexperienced monster and understood basic battlefield strategy. These repeated orc assaults felt like preparation for something larger, a final push that might use all of their resources. For now, no C-rank enemies had appeared. They remained at a distance, watching. Rusty did not understand the full plan, but the number of D-rank monsters had been increasing. If this continued, and the next attack came with every orc in the forest at once, he was not sure the walls would hold. The nobles, he suspected, would not come to their aid, and the life he had built here would come to an end. So what should I do?